there! Welcome to the Untitled Film Podcast.
God, that was terrible. You blew out the eardrums.
I'm Johnny, and this is...
Well, if you get to do a southern accent, well, I'm going to do a southern accent too, by God.
I would
My
argue
name's Callum.
that I wasn't doing a southern accent, I was just making a noise, but...
Well, it sounded kind of like a kind of yeehaw cowboy sort of thing. That's what I thought you were going for.
Yeehaw, rootin' tootin' cowboy time. The cowboy
I
southern?
never. I think that kind of whole stereotype is kind of southern / Texan / cowboys.
I think it's more Texan.
Belle.
That's more like a grandpa-esque kind, like a... I don't know, something off
I've
The
been
Simpsons.
watching The Golden Girls, so I've been doing Blanche Devereaux impressions.
Fair enough.
Oh my lord!
Anyway, wow.
We've been lost the entirety of the south of America.
Yeah.
And the Texan side, which isn't the same.
Luckily, I don't think we have a huge amount of viewing figures there anyway.
Probably not.
Or listening figures.
I think we'll be all right.
Yeah. Either that or they loved it and were like, that was the greatest impression of all time.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I wasn't really doing an impression. I was just making noises.
Well, you may have stumbled into an accurate impression there.
I don't think so, but there we go.
You never know. You never know what they think.
Anyway, Callum, if they want to see these imaginary listeners from the deep south of the States want to see more impressions and good stuff from us, where might they find such things?
Well, you can hop along to Untitled Film Podcast, and well, by God, there's lots of good content on there on Instagram and Facebook, and we ask questions. You can send us a message, and we're also on YouTube. If you haven't gotten up with this whole Spotify revolution, hello, Mum. I asked a question this week. We didn't get any responses, but I'll get a response from you. Since we're doing true crime, what are some cases or crimes that you'd like to see dramatized either as a documentary that you haven't seen before, or as like a David Fincher Zodiac sort of thing? Because I have one, but I was wondering if you had one.
The case of why Callum always says I buy that for $1 after the middle of the episode.
Because RoboCop's a great movie, and I want to make sure that everybody knows it.
If you say so. I can't. I'm sure there's loads. I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Okay, well, I'll jump in. For a little while, when I got into my true crime stage, as a lot of teenagers do, one that really interested me.
I mean, you in your 30s, but okay.
Yeah. Well, from my teens until my 30s, it hasn't stopped. One case that I've always been interested in that hasn't got a lot of coverage, except very recently there was a fictionalized book made about it, and maybe that will be a film one day. It's about the New Orleans Axeman who chopped up Italian butchers and greengrocers in New Orleans in the 1920s, and it's got ties to the mob. There's lots of speculation. He was never caught, so it's one of those things that would make a good movie. Made a very good book. I've read the book, The Axeman's Jazz, because apparently he wouldn't kill anyone if you played jazz, and there was a certain night that everybody had to have jazz playing in, and he would roam the streets, and if you didn't hear jazz, he'd come to get you, and that was one of his things. So I think it would make a really good movie. Maybe one day the book will be adapted, but so far there hasn't been an adaptation. So hopefully that.
I'll tell you one that I don't remember being in the movie. Have you heard of H.H. Holmes?
Yes, I have.
So he was a con artist and serial killer that basically built a giant house where he would kill people effectively. But yeah, they reckon he confessed to 27 murders while he was alive, but probably did a lot more. I think his tale's pretty crazy.
Works, but they've never been able to get it going. So I think one was supposed to be made with Leonardo DiCaprio. I think it was going to be a Scorsese film, but it just fell apart. And it's been a few of Hollywood's big leading men have wanted to play H.H. Holmes. I think Bradley Cooper was another one.
I feel like it could go either way. Like you could make a, like a really low budget, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Obviously, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and what's the Hitchcock film, the really famous one that's just gone on my head? Psycho. Obviously, they're based on the same murderer, very different takes. And I feel like with that, you could either do like the House of Horrors, and have like a really like low budget, almost like
I think that would be really cool. I would love to see that, like a trapped in the House of Horrors
yeah, it'd be
stuff.
kind of like Saw-esque, but in like
Yeah,
late 18th century, like Saw meets Sweeney Todd.
that would be really cool.
Or
I
you
think
could do it like really accurate, kind of a bit like the Osage one that's coming out soon, the
Hollywood,
Killer of the
if you're
Moonflower,
listening, we want $1 million. Don't want
or
anything less.
$100 million and nothing in between.
Oh, I meant for our paycheck, not
Oh,
for the budget. I
oh
couldn't give a.
okay.
We'll write it. Some schmuck will direct it, and Leonardo DiCaprio will star in it.
Well, if it's the high budget one, maybe. But anyway,
Maybe.
we shall see. But no, that is our ideas for moving. Yeah. Speaking of ideas for movies, some new movies and information about movies has been announced this week, and in a thing that we sometimes call the news. Callum, do you have any news for us this week?
Yes, quite a nice one actually. Martin Scorsese was recently interviewed by Edgar Wright in an hour-and-a-half special for the BFI, and for a while there were only pictures and clips being released, but the whole thing has been released on the BFI channel's YouTube channel. It's all there. I watched it earlier today. It's really lovely. They have a really good conversation. They go through a whole career retrospective while also hyping up, because this is what it's ultimately for, hyping up his next film, The Killers of the Flower Moon. And it was a really nice conversation. And anyone who's interested in the history of cinema, because Scorsese is a custodian of that, and just interested in his career, go and watch it. It's good fun.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds very interesting. Very storied career and probably closer to the end than the start. So no, interesting to see. I think that kind of actually brings me on for a plug for next week's episode. I think next week we are going to be doing a retrospective of
Quentin Tarantino.
So wait for us to praise him, drag him a bit, and we're going to give our top 10 tier lists as well, or be 9, I suppose, or 10 because Kill Bill counts as 2.
Yeah, it depends how we choose.
Because we haven't, obviously, the 10th movie's not out yet.
I count it as 2, to be fair.
I count it as 2 as well. So it'll be 10 movies. We'll be our top 10. Because technically he'll have done 11 movies, despite he says 10. But anyway, that's next week. My piece of news this week is, you may have seen this, Daredevil was getting another series finally. And they have fired all the writers and are going scorched earth and starting from scratch, which is either very, very good or very, very bad.
I wonder if this is retaliation a bit for the whole writer's strike, like just to flex their muscle a bit, maybe.
Either that or maybe I don't know who the writers were, so I don't know if they were the same writers as the old series. I don't know if they used
the original showrunner kind of made a point of talking about how much he wasn't involved with it because he didn't want to be associated with Disney fluffiness.
Fair enough. I wondered if they were going maybe down the Hulk route and realised, She-Hulk even, and realised that maybe that was too fluffy and they've gone a bit darker or something. We'll see.
Maybe.
It's either a good or a bad thing, isn't it? I suppose it's either they're trying to shake, after many, many failures recently, trying to shake up the Marvel TV universe, or it's Disney overcorrecting as they sometimes do. We'll find out. We'll probably find out in the not too distant future.
Proof will certainly be in the pudding.
Absolutely. Excellent. Well, that is the news for this week. We're doing a nice short one. So, Callum, what are we going to be talking about this week? I know you mentioned earlier that we will be talking about true crime.
Yes. So 2 true crime specials. Both of them are on Netflix. The
British.
First one yes, and they're both British crimes. They are the most recent one from 2023 this year is Who Killed Jill Dando? And then we're going to go back to the very far off year of 2020 to talk about the documentary The Ripper, about the Yorkshire Ripper. Both very sordid pieces of things. Suddenly became very inarticulate, but yes, 2 true crime documentaries. So we'll be starting with Who Killed Jill Dando. Who wants to take it? I don't mind taking this one.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so the Jill Dando, she was a presenter in the 90s, very popular. She presented Crime Watch, which in a way was kind of one of the first proper, even though it was kind of billed itself as you can help find these criminals. If you have any advice or if you know any of these people, call the line. But a lot of people watched it in the same way that they watch true crime today, just to kind of gawp and to rubberneck. She was the host, but not only of that, but also of the news. And she was very successful, very professional. And in the late 90s, in 1999, she was killed just outside her house. And this documentary goes through what very little is known, the various suspects, the eventual trial of the main suspect, if you like, and the fallouts that all went around. Kind of who did this? Was it these people? Was it that person? And the kind of inconclusivity of it all. So, Johnny, what did you think of Who Killed Jill Dando?
Yeah, it's all right. It's pretty standard Netflix affair. Up until the final episode, but I'll come up to that in a minute. First couple of episodes, it's found footage. It's a few talking heads kind of glued together. A lot of theories that possibly don't really stack up, or aren't really that well fleshed out. And then it turns interesting. So for those that don't know too much about the murder of Jill Dando was a very famous TV presenter, as Callum has said, in the UK, one of the biggest people. She was kind of known for her likeness to Princess Diana and was kind of like, it was a massive, everyone knew who she was at the time. And her death was a real tragedy, but also a real shock to a lot of people. But the person who eventually was done for it was, some would say, slam dunk case, and some would say incredibly dubious. And I think probably the answer is somewhere in between, because I don't think he was necessarily the nicest piece of work in the world. But they interview him in this documentary, and they are the most interesting, most harrowing bits of it. And it kind of starts to elevate it slightly at that point. And also, it's one of those things. It's quite. I've watched a few documentaries recently where someone who's maybe at the center of something has been interviewed, and you're kind of trying to. And if you haven't got a fully formed opinion, you can't decide what way you're going to go, and you're trying to suss them out. Are they telling the truth? Are they a liar? Are they a scumbag? Are they an innocent who's been caught on the wheels of justice? And I think that is probably the most interesting part of this documentary. But overall, the nuts and bolts are there for the most part, but it starts to elevate in the last episode. And your thoughts, Callum?
Yeah, I mean, quite a lot. I think I'm a bit more negative than you, because the more I think about it, the more these kinds of Netflix documentaries are starting to annoy me a bit, because they're so cranked out for content that it doesn't matter if there's really nothing to talk about. And especially over 3 episodes, as you were saying, it's 2 episodes of being inconclusive, and then it's one fairly interesting episode. But it's true, the first 2 episodes, there's about 20 minutes of summing up, like, who is this person, why is she important, this is her career, she was very impressive, she's very well liked. Okay, that's great. And then for the next, I don't know, hour, so over 2 episodes, so the last 20 minutes of that first episode, and then the whole entirety of episode 2, it's one big we don't know, we don't, why are you asking us? There's almost a sort of defensiveness about it, where they just seem to flit around quite a bit in episode 2. Like, well, maybe she reported on these people in a war. Maybe it was someone who was a victim of that war who was irate. Yeah, maybe it was, filmmaker. But if you can't really say, that's not worthy of 10 minutes of our screen time. It's barely worthy of one. And I don't know. I just find these Netflix documentaries, when there isn't something solid to hang your hat on, which I think we'll get to in the next one, there's a very kind of like, look, we don't care, you don't care. You're watching this with your tea after a long night at work. You want something to switch off to. Let's not pretend anyone cares. Oh, by the way, the 3rd episode's come out, and actually, this one's fairly interesting, because the accused, while he might not have murdered her, we don't know. Again, he's a very strange and very creepy person. He has lots of sexual assault crimes to his name, and is a very, and there was a moment of actual friction there where your skin actually does crawl a bit. But we reviewed the hatchet wielding hitchhiker not so long ago, and that was bad taste. There was a grubbiness to it all, a exploitation to it all, and even though that's not good, there's still a feeling of something to talk about. At least you can then go, oh, wasn't it bad taste? This one is too well behaved to even be bad taste. There's just nothing to chew on. And, there's almost like Netflix, like I said, is looking at you and going, look, we don't care. You don't care. You're just watching this while you wash your dishes. So let's not pretend anyone really cares. and these on-demand documentaries are starting to tick me off a bit with that. In fact, the director Marcus Plowright a while ago in 2019 made a 1 hour special, The Murder of Jill Dando, that went out on TV. I can't see which channel it's on. IMDb doesn't say, but it seems like that would have been a lot better, an hour-long special. But yes, sorry for my rant.
Yeah, I kind of know what you mean. I still, yeah, I think it does. I think this is partially the problem you have when you have a lot of kind of weird unsolved cases. It sometimes is really hard to kind of pin stuff down. Obviously, there's lots of theories, but how do you kind of connect those kind of bits together? There was that. I think her name's Carrie Lamb. I don't know if you remember Netflix did a documentary about the Cecil Hotel.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
So Cecil Hotel is this quite famous hotel on Skid Row in LA that is known for over the years to have like lots of suicides and all these things happen there. And about 10, 15 years ago, there was a young lady who was like visiting from, I think, from Canada. And somehow then they found her body in the water tank on the roof of the building. And there was like this like CCTV footage of her looking like talking to herself, look like she's arguing with someone, and but you can't see who it is. And anyway, they did a 4-part series on that, and nothing like it's all bullshit basically. And then basically the end goes, oh, actually she probably just had a schizophrenic episode and jumped in the water tank. So yeah, very kind of like suspect. And I think it's a bit like that. Other than I say the last episode's quite interesting. If they'd made like an hour and a half movie of it, with that kind of being the piece of resistance, but like, yeah, it kind of tells you about the case and tells you about Jill Dando a bit, and then kind of like drifts around for a bit, going, well, some people said they thought they saw a car. Other people thought they said they saw a person at a bus. Other people thought they said they saw this. Also, she was reporting on this, and also this, and also, and it's just like 6 theories, 10 minutes, giving them each 10 minutes, and yeah, like you say, it doesn't really hang together that much. Having said that, I think this is a hard thing, really. Like, is it disrespectful to make something that's not like amazing about something so important? Is it kind of disrespectful to make basically having your tea kind of with it kind of programming? And I think we're going to get to something where you definitely wouldn't want to be eating your tea with it after. But like, but that's kind of what it is. It's kind of like mild-mannered, mediocre, like, you know, eat your veg kind of TV. It doesn't really do anything particularly special. And I think it is a bit weird to, you know, if it's something so true crime's interesting, people are interested in it because they're interested in the macabre and stuff. And I think if you're going to do it, you have to kind of do it right. You can't be too sensational and you can't be too flippant. And I think this airs towards too flippant until the final episode.
No, very much agreed. It's just very weightless, and you brought up an interesting point there. Is it, even though the documentary isn't bad taste, like I didn't get the sense of exploitation from it, but is it just bad taste in general to make true crime documentaries about people who died, and then only with the intention of making a few bucks, getting a few eyeballs, and having people eating their dinner, washing their dishes, while this is sort of playing in the background and going, "Oh, right,
I kind
she
of,
died." Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I personally have the opinion that it's some of these things are important to tell, and it's important to understand these people and stuff. But like, understand human psychology and things. But I think if you're going to do it, you have to do it respectfully.
It's certainly a fine line.
And I don't think this was disrespectful, but I don't know if it was good enough quality to make
Yeah.
it. I mean, there's other
I
things I've
didn't
seen
get the
before where
impression.
like I found them actually like disrespectful. I'm like, this has
Sure.
gone a step too far. I feel like the second season of Making a Murderer went maybe a bit disrespectful. Bearing in mind like people actually have died because of this and
Yeah.
and stuff. Whereas the first season actually did seem quite interesting. But yeah.
No, I certainly didn't get the impression that it was mucky or kind of grubby or anything like that.
No. Anyway, I think that probably wraps up our thoughts on Who Killed Jill Dando.
I think so.
Excellent. And with that, here is an advertisement break. And Callum's not going to say I'll buy that for $1 afterwards because it would be disrespectful bearing in mind what we're talking about this week.
Oh, you bastard.
And welcome back to this very respectful episode.
Hushed tones. See, I'm not going to say it.
Good.
We have to do the podcast voice.
So next, we're going to talk about Ripper.
Or The Ripper. I think
Ripper, is it?
It's probably a definite article.
This is a slight tangent, but it's probably because the night before I was drinking an Australian wine called Ripper, because Ripper in Australia has a very different meaning.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Ripper in Australia is like means like really good, and it's like,
oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's very different meaning.
Yeah. But anyway, The Ripper. It's not about Jack the Ripper, as some people may suspect. It's actually about the Yorkshire Ripper, which is a lesser known murderer, although still incredibly well known in the UK. But probably doesn't have the reverence around the world. Hasn't got the movies and things made about it. But it was a series of murders in the 1970s in Yorkshire, in the UK, around kind of the Leeds Bradford area. And I think it extended as far as Manchester and things at times. And the reason they were called the Ripper murderers, or he was called the Yorkshire Ripper, was because initially it started out as he was the person was predominantly murdering prostitutes. But that kind of, I think accidentally at first moved out of that, and then eventually I think he just started indiscriminately killing anyone he fancied killing. And this is a documentary about the police investigation, which was complex, and they were a bit at a loss. It was pre-DNA evidence, pre all these kind of things we have now, and the person that did it was quite good at covering their tracks within reason. Eventually following on to them having found him. Yeah, and Callum, what did you think?
I thought it was quite a bit better, partly because, as you know, as we know, it's a solved thing, so there's a real narrative that you can put around it, which sounds incredibly bad taste when I say it like that, but just in terms of making,
well, it's nice to know someone's in jail for it.
Well, yes, no, that is true. But in terms of making a documentary, this isn't one of the ones that's just churned out where someone can go, "Oh, we don't know, we don't know." Instead, they do very much know, and there is a through line of what was going on. It's also a historical case. It's the late 70s, so there's a changing Britain that was going on, Thatcherite Britain, feminism, the Reclaim the Night movement, all of which kind of churns into what was going on, because the Yorkshire Ripper, so one very important thing, later on they started putting curfews out, so a curfew on women in the streets, and there's this gigantic Reclaim the Night movement where they're holding signs that say, ban men from the streets and things like that. And I think with any Netflix documentary, it's probably going to be a ceiling for how much I enjoy it, because I do think they're made with a bit too much sizzle, because they are making them purely for entertainment. And I think for true crime documentaries, I do like something a little bit more earthy, or a little bit more with a bit more filmmaking finesse that isn't just kind of quick cutting, flashy editing tricks, if that makes sense. So something like a Thin Blue Line or something like that. But as this is probably up there in terms of Netflix documentaries, it's at near the top of that ceiling, just because there's a lot going on, and I think it does a good job of contextualizing things historically, and talking about police incompetence, which is if you've listened to enough true crime podcasts or true crime stories, police incompetence comes back again, again, and again, again, and again, and they contextualize everything very well. At first, I thought it was actually letting them off the hook a bit, because in episodes 1 and 2, they seem to be only interviewing the victims and the police, and the victims were very sad, and the police were like, "Oh, we were trying everything. But then it starts to, and I was a little bit worried. But then they start to get into the meat of it and going, "Well, you didn't try that. You messed up that." So I think it did a good job of contextualizing that with only a little bit too much Netflix secret sauce on top, which I'm never going to be completely a fan of. But overall, I liked it, yeah. And what about yourself?
I think it's one of the best Netflix series out there. I actually don't think it has I don't think it is over edited in the way a lot of stuff on Netflix is. Like, it's not over edited like Making a Murderer is, or it's not over. I didn't feel like they were trying to cut the story into a certain place. I thought they were telling a fairly well rounded, telling of the story. I quite like some of the visual cues. I quite like that when there was important information, they kind of put it up on the screen in a like actual text and things, which kind of made it stand out. And I thought that was quite well done visually. I like the use of found footage, and I thought they had some good interviews, and I thought the interviews merged with the found footage was the right amount of balance. I kind of, unless they're done incredibly well, find like reconstructions cheesy, and they didn't really do that, which I thought was good. They seem to be enough found footage out there. Like some of the found footage, some of the stuff that must have been shown on the news at the time was quite incredible. Like you wouldn't show some of the things
Yeah,
today.
I thought that myself.
There was like shots of people in fields dead and stuff because he seemed to just dump people in the middle of fields. And yeah, I don't think you'd be allowed that on the news anymore. But I assume it's all news recordings. But it's yeah, I think it's very well put together. I think it tells the story well. I think it kind of at first it shows like the cops is quite well meaning and stuff, and then it starts to go, hang on, why didn't you suss this thing out earlier? Why didn't you listen to this person? Why didn't you pay more attention to this? They seem to put more stock in certain bits of evidence than others, and to at their detriment, they didn't seem to have the whole piece of the puzzle. And I also think it just sounds like they had too much going on. They didn't like get rid of lines of inquiry quick enough. They just kind of it went all over the place. There was a bit where they're talking about how many they had, like something like 5 million pieces of paper, and they had to like reinforce the floor of the like building where the offices where they were trying to look for him in because there was so much paper, which just seems maddening. Like how are you going to get through that much kind of paperwork and things? So yeah, it is. Yeah, so I quite like the way that they kind of brought that stuff in, and then I quite liked it's quite anticlimactic, obviously. If anyone who knows the Yorkshire Ripper, I've forgotten, is it Ian Brady?
No, it's not Ian Brady. It's Peter Sutcliffe.
Peter Sutcliffe. I get the two mixed up because the other one was the
Is that
Moors
the Moors one?
murderer. Yeah. Um, Peter Sutcliffe. When they kind of actually found him, everyone was like, "Oh, him? He's this monster. He just looks quite mild mannered and whatever." But yeah, actually, obviously, a massive monster. And kind of the way they talk about that, and also the way, because all these people have been like, how ridiculous and horrendous it is that you just go again. It's that whole victim blaming thing. Going, well, women don't be out after 10 p.m. because you might get murdered. And that kind of stuff was kind of a more interesting side of it. And when they caught him, and there's like thousands of people show up outside the courthouse just to boo him, like I'm like, yeah, fuck that guy. And that stuff was kind of interesting as well to see, and just to shows how big a thing it was at the time. You don't, I think maybe in the States there's a lot more serial killers like this, but they're quite rare in the UK. And often if they are, they're not kind of put together until after. So to have something like this that was just like such a big running thing in the news was huge in the 70s. So I was intrigued at kind of the social context of it all as well.
Yeah, no, that was the thing I liked best about it. I think as a fan of true crime, um, a lot of true crime is just boring because there's not a lot. It's a horrible case that they're talking about, sure, but you kind of feel like, well, there's nothing else to talk about. I think the best true crime, like whether it's a fictionalized account like David Fincher's Zodiac, or a documentary like this, or actually there is several books and a TV miniseries about that's contextualized around the police work of the Yorkshire Ripper, called the Red Riding Trilogy. I'm not sure if
Mhm.
you saw that. Um, the best true crime talks really about the time in which this was allowed to happen because of primitive police technology changing face of Britain, or if it's an American crime, changing face of America. And I think that's what this did very well, is that it showed that how things were shifting from the late 70s into the early 80s. And I think that was what was, I think, the most meat about this, and they did a good job. In fact, they could have probably done it a bit more. I think of the 4 episodes, the middle 2 were the most interesting, just because they were talking about feminism in Britain, police being overworked, but also in some ways incompetent.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think I wanted to. I think if I have some minor criticisms, I would like to see a documentary that was kind of more around that, with the
Contextualizing it more, kind
yeah,
of.
yeah, with the Peter Sutcliffe as more as the undercurrent of the changing times, rather than with the Ripper being the title thing, and then the police and changing times being the undercurrent. I think.
Almost a little bit like Summer of Sam did as a movie,
Yeah,
in that kind of, yeah, kind of, showing what was going on. Because it was mentioned at times, like, about the liberalization of things in the UK, and kind of people for the first time starting to live together without being married, and all, and
yeah, exactly.
things starting to change for people in the LGBTQ community, although not fully being there, but starting to change and stuff. So, yeah, it's definitely kind of interesting from that point of view.
I think the Red Riding trilogy does that very well. So if you want to, after you've watched the Ripper, everyone, if you find wherever Red Riding trilogy is, I'd watch that as a sort of as a chaser.
Absolutely. Excellent. I think that probably wraps us up quite nicely there.
I think so.
So, Callum, what are your thoughts on the Who Killed Dando?
I was very tempted to give it quite a low, very low score, but I think the 3rd episode does pull it up a little bit. But just to kind of be mean, because I want to show meanness to these Netflix documentaries that are just sort of tossed off. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. Yeah, cranked out, thrown out, whatever. I'm going to give it 4 out of 10. I'm going to be mean to it.
I think if I was if it was in the first couple of episodes, which just really are kind of like the lowest common denominator stuff, I think I'd be with you like a 3 or a 4. But I think the last episode raised it, and I think the last episode was probably a 7. So I'm going to split the difference and give it a 5.
Nice,
excellent. And then the Ripper.
I think the Ripper I'm going to give a 7. It's not perfect. It's still got a bit of Netflix sheen, not the most, but a little bit. And I think there's always going to be a ceiling for these kinds of true crime documentaries where I can't really get above that ceiling. So, and I would like to see more of the contextualized history rather than the stuff just about the Ripper. So 7, but very good otherwise, and I'd recommend it.
Yeah, I think I pretty much agree with you on all of that. I probably would just about give it an 8, because I did think it was really well put together overall. And certainly the higher end of Netflix stuff, but yeah, not got that kind of like 5, that 10 out of 10 like the Thin Blue Line or something like that would have.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, I agree. So that means that we are going to give Dando 4.5 and the Ripper 7.5. So
yes.
Go and watch the Ripper. Probably maybe give Dando a miss.
Check out the Ripper on Netflix.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Come and join us next week for a very special episode, and we will speak to you soon. Bye.
Bye. Oh my lord!